This Week in Startups is brought to you by WordPress.com. Right now, WordPress is offering you 15% off any new plan purchase. To create your small business website today, visit WordPress.com/twist. And Wistia. Create your free Wistia account today and get started hosting your videos in just minutes at wistia.com/twist. Our iTunes review of the week is from 2020. As a 20-year vet in the business, I am still learning something new every time I listen. Great show with great guests.
Thanks again to the Upfront team and Mark Suster, my good friend. We're on a couple of investments together, and I just thought it'd be nice to maybe give the Upfront team a big round of applause for this amazing 2 days. What a crowd. It's a great crowd. Particularly good-looking crowd this year too, Vinod. Attractive crowd. You guys are in for a real treat. We have a 30-year vet of venture capital, entrepreneur. And I think, I would dare say an American treasure.
He means I'm 30 years old.
30 years old, exactly. You came here in 1976 to go to school. Mm-hmm. And you founded a little company in 1984, I believe.
82.
What was the inspiration for that company in 1982?
I actually founded a company in 1980 right out of school called Daisy Systems, which was a CAD system, and we had to build too much of the hardware. And so I decided a bigger market was starting a company that built workstations that CAD designers could build their software on. So it was pretty obvious. There was nothing particularly visionary about it. Once you did build a CAD application and had to build your own hardware to do it, you said, well, it'd be nice if everybody who's building an application had hardware to work on.
Tell me about the first meeting with an investor for Sun Microsystems. Do you remember that first meeting? Where were you? Who was it with?
This is, it's actually a story that nobody's ever asked me about. When I was starting my first company, which was Daisy Systems, for a variety of reasons, one of the venture capitalists was cut out because my co-founder had a father-in-law in Israel who short-circuited the funding round. But I kept good relations with Bob Sackman, and when I decided to start Sun, I went to him, and literally in an hour on one paragraph of writing, he wrote me a check for $375,000.
On one paragraph, and $375,000 back then. An engineer back then was what, $25,000 a year?
Yeah, something like that. But this is the great deal. For those of you who are entrepreneurs in the room, I turned to Bob and I said, Bob, this is a great deal. Nobody would give me this deal in India. This is why this is such a great country. If we lose, we lose. If we win, we win. We both win. If we lose, you lose. Because the only thing I could lose is my student loans. I had nothing else, so.
Right, you were starting with zero. What was the valuation, and how did you negotiate the valuation? Or was there no negotiation because you were, how old, 23, 24?
Yeah, I was very young. I'd finished 2 master's degrees, so roughly 24 or 25 when I did my first startup. I don't remember the valuation, to be honest. I know, and this becomes important, we sort of split the equity equally among the founders, both at Sun and before. And once you do that, if you build a big enough company, that split actually doesn't matter. What matters is how big a company you can build, how big a pie you can build.
I'm assuming your parents were alive at this time, and I hope they were. When you called your parents to tell them that you had raised $375,000 to do this company, what was their reaction?
Well, it's hard frankly, not only for my parents in India, but everybody here, there weren't that many startups. It was pretty unusual to do a startup, especially if you went to Stanford Business School. People thought you were crazy to do a startup. and we set our starting salaries at, I think, $2,000 a month or something. And so it was pretty odd when you could get a job at Goldman or McKinsey.
So your parents were not pleased?
Oh, no, my parents were quite happy to let me do my thing. But they were surprised anybody would give me money.
And were they still in India?
Yes.
And so you build Sun Microsystems, it catches fire, but at some point you decide you want to be a venture capitalist. Take me through that thinking.
Yeah, I switched sides. John Doerr of Kleiner Perkins was on my board. And I went from Sun to Kleiner Perkins and did that for about 20 years.
How did he convince you to leave being a founder? You know, here you are, an engineer, you know, a technical person, and I'm assuming, did you go to business school at that time, or were you just?
I had finished business school, so I finished a master's and then business school. So
how did that conversation go? How did he convince you to become an investor as opposed to remaining an entrepreneur?
Well, so Daisy was pretty successful, and then Sun was doing very well. And I actually get bored pretty easily. That's why I'm always in a new area. And I was looking around for new things. And John actually first convinced me to join him, and I said, I don't really want to do venture capital. I thought I might want to do something completely different than high tech. Actually, I love design, and I wanted to do furniture design and architecture. That was my real love. And I'd started working with some architects on a house I still live in. But John convinced me to join him, and I sort of nominally said I'd work part-time, but it was 50 hours a week kind of part-time, and then 20 years later.
Tell me about those early days of venture capital. It's the 80s. Obviously, the PC revolution is well underway. Microsoft has gone public at that time, and that was a huge driver. Lotus, Mitch Kapor, a bunch of interesting companies bubbling up. What was the venture industry like then? What was the velocity of companies coming to your office? What were the founders like?
Well, there were a lot fewer startups. There were more experienced teams in general. I think a lot more younger kids are starting companies now. That wasn't common. And the other thing that wasn't common was being able to have credibility as a startup to attract good management. Like today, it's not unusual for senior executives from large companies to come join a startup. In fact, if somebody's at Cisco too long, then you probably don't want to hire them. Now, the worst thing you can have on your resume today is 20 years at a large company.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite now.
Yeah, it's kind of an opposite. The environment wasn't as rich in terms of being able to recruit, attract people, the number of people who wanted to do startups. But there were always enough ideas around.
Tell me about the entrepreneurs you met with in the 80s, and particularly the ones that you found just wildly impressive in that cohort.
Boy, it's so hard to remember. I just remember so little about those days and the people I met. Obviously, in the Kleiner portfolio when I joined Kleiner was Mitch Kapor, because Kleiner had funded Lotus, and Rod Kenyon, because Kleiner had funded Compaq. So there was a cohort of names that was pretty powerful. Kleiner had funded Genentech. So there was quite a few really great companies there, and those CEOs, but they were all small companies, so they didn't look that imposing back then.
Hey everybody, let me tell you about a product I've been using for over 10 years. It's WordPress.com. Small business owners, WordPress.com is saluting you. They know you're out there making a big difference, creating jobs, and creating great products and services. WordPress is the perfect solution to build your website and keep it up to date. They are powering more websites with WordPress than any other platform. They've been at this for a long time. I've known Matt Mullenweg forever. He's been on this podcast, I think, 3 times. He's a fantastic founder. And that's why I use WordPress on calacanis.com and this very site, thisweekinstartups.com. They provide great design features and 24-hour support 7 days a week. You can pick from 350 easy-to-use themes. Just pick a domain, select a plan, and start building. It's mobile-friendly, super easy to use. Go to wordpress.com/twist, wordpress.com/twist, and you will be able to create your small business website today, and you'll get 15% off any new plan purchase. That's right, 15% off wordpress.com/twist. It's a great product and a great founder and a great team over there. So go ahead and visit wordpress.com/twist. Okay, let's get back to this amazing episode.
And into the 90s, the internet happened. This created a huge boom. When did you realize that the commercial version of the internet, because obviously you were aware of ARPANET and DARPA and all of those things, but when did you realize that maybe AOL and Prodigy were not going to be the future and the internet was? Was there a moment of clarity for you?
Yes. I'd say Sun was one of the first companies to use Ethernet and TCP/IP as protocols. For those who are not familiar with it, it's sort of the guts, the language of the internet is TCP/IP. We started using it in 1982. And I met Steve Case, who was also, by the way, funded by Kleiner in the late 80s.
That worked out okay.
That worked out okay. But I realized that dial-up wasn't the right way. In fact, I had an interesting dialogue at the FCC on, as you write comment letters back and forth, I was pretty active about writing. AT&T was insisting that nobody ever needed more than 64 kilobits at home. And nobody ever needed more than 480 pixels in a TV, so they were pushing for the HD TV standard to be 480 pixels.
Yeah, quite visionary at the time.
And they thought people like us were revolutionaries who were dreamers and didn't know reality and practicality. Anyway, put it in perspective, I think every 5 years or so, something major has changed. I like to say when I started, I put my email address in 1982 on my business card. I remember meeting some of my business school classmates, and they laughed at me all evening over dinner for being a nerd enough to have an email address, let alone put it on your business card. And if you said to anybody, hey, in a few years, say 1985, everybody would have a PC in their home, you'd be laughed at. You know, in 1985, if you said grandma would use email, you'd be laughed at. 1990, if you said to people, hey, the internet would be real and it's not this phone dial-up stuff or AT&T's view of the world, you'd be laughed at. 1995, we started working on Juniper to build TCP/IP routers. And literally every single customer survey we did, and this is a really interesting point on why not to listen to your customers, every major carrier told me they would never buy a TCP/IP router for the public network. I feel like one of my larger contributions in life has actually been to start Juniper, which became the only pure play TCP/IP router and changed the trajectory of the internet. In fact, Cisco had insisted they'd never do TCP/IP for the public network at high speeds.
Somebody told me Juniper was not only your biggest hit in terms of return, but perhaps the biggest return in the history of venture investing. Is that true?
You know, I don't know if it's the biggest because I haven't kept track of every other, but we made about a $5 million investment that, as distributed, returned $7 billion. So that was nice.
Math here. So 7.
Yeah.
So it's like
I don't know
actually
how to get
returned over 1,000x cat. Yeah. That worked out pretty well for you too.
Yes.
Now,
But look, there's a point.
there is a point.
And the point is, we did something we believed in. It was sort of a field of dreams. The world should have TCP/IP. Every major carrier was going with a technology called ATM. And Cisco had bought an ATM company. And we just said the world will be different, and all these big guys have no idea what they're talking about. And everybody tried to dissuade us from investing because it wasn't a reasonable market, because the customers were saying it's not a good idea.
And after you do something on that scale,
And the world's a very different place. And that's why I say to entrepreneurs, one entrepreneur can really change trajectories. Pradeep Sindhu, who is the founder of Juniper, changed the trajectory of the internet, I believe. Just like Elon Musk has changed the trajectory of electric cars. Entrepreneurs can make a difference. Larry and Sergey have changed the trajectory of information.
and after you hit something that big, why do you keep coming to work every day? I mean, a lot of people after a hit of that magnitude would have hung it up. You seem to double down, go harder, and you started your own firm.
So the question is, what do you enjoy in life? I love working on new ideas, high impact, low probability of success ideas that are real risks that nobody else will take. I love to do things that generally wouldn't happen otherwise. And I love assisting entrepreneurs in building their ideas and companies. So one of the things, I've never called myself a venture capitalist. I always said I was a venture assistant. In fact, John Dewey used to get mad at me because I'd say I'm a venture assistant, not a venture capitalist. Because my job is not the money, but to increase the probability of success of an entrepreneur by pushing them to think harder, think about things they're not thinking about, ask questions. And that's a very important function. If you've seen enough of it and seen enough mistakes made, then you want new entrepreneurs to have the benefit of that. Somebody once asked me, like, what makes you a better entrepreneur? I'd say I've screwed up more often than almost anybody I know, in more ways than anybody I know, because I made so many stupid mistakes that I just hope I don't have to repeat them. And I can help an entrepreneur avoid some of them.
All right, so you opened up the door. Let's talk about some of the huge mistakes that Vinod Khosla has made. When you look back on your career, do you have a moment in time where you say, like, wow, I was just so wrong and I would have done it differently? And what do you think led to those mistakes?
How much time do you have?
Well, let's just go just for like a minute or two on it, because I got some other questions.
I'll give you a couple of examples, right? Two very different examples. Cisco was a router, but it was routing software that was running on Sun motherboards originally. And Sun's motto, if those who remember it, was the network is the computer. And I considered stupid that I didn't realize, that networking would be a huge thing as big as computing, and Cisco became at one point a higher market cap than Sun. I mean, that's pure, like, duh, what was I thinking?
So you assumed that the servers would be worth more than the plumbing.
I guess I was just plain blind because we were being successful. And so you don't think as hard when you're being successful. And I always tell people, if you've really had great success, then you're less likely to be successful again because you're less paranoid and have higher confidence. So that's a piece of advice to all entrepreneurs. The more successful you are, the less likely you are to repeat it because you'll have too much confidence. And paranoia is key to always asking questions.
You can be blinded by the success of your existing product lines. I mean, if Apple just rested on the PCs, they couldn't have seen the iPhone.
It's very common.
Hey everybody, you know how much I love Wistia. You know how much I love having control of my videos and how they're presented, and the ability to grow our mailing list at This Week in Startups. So when you go to thisweekinstartups.com, you're going to see we use a product called Wistia, Wistia. TIA, Wistia.com. Go to Wistia.com/twist, and you'll get a free account, and you'll start hosting videos in minutes. Now, why is this so important? It's so important because you need to control in a business setting or in your podcast setting, you want to control the experience when people watch your video. You don't want wacky annotations, all kinds of ads layered onto it, cruft, garbage. And you certainly don't want your competitors' videos coming up and suggestions all around it. You want to control your experience and have a beautiful, clean experience that allows you to do high-end marketing techniques like put videos behind a paywall or a password, and to get people to sign up with an email and give them that prompt, hey, want to get the next episode, come to the launch festival free, put your email in. Hey, want to get a white paper? They have over 330,000 using Wistia now. When they started on This Week in Startups, just like 2 or 3 years ago, they only had 50,000. So this company is growing amazingly. I mean, I wish I could be an investor in it. They are crushing it. And you get great analytics, trends, viewer streams. You can really see like, oh, people are rewinding the video and watching this section twice. I always find that fascinating. And as I said, it's super easy to use. You have tons of support. And one of the things they do great, and listen, you can go look at this for free. On their blog, they explain how to use microphones, how to use cameras, how to edit, how to make great content. All because they know that if you're coming from a business situation, you may not have made video before, but your consumers are demanding video and they want video on a regular basis. Video is the best way to communicate. You're hearing my voice. You're seeing me on thisweekinstartups.com. You want to watch videos when you come look at a product, service, or any website. You look for the video first, and Wistia is going to help you make and serve those great videos. They integrate with all the major email and marketing automation tools. Clients include MailChimp, Moz, HubSpot, Zendesk, Herman Miller, Sam Adams, and of course, This Week in Startups and Launch. We love it, and get their guides to build using the right microphones and lighting and setup and all that kind of stuff. It's really great hacks. Wistia.com/twist. I love this product. Go use it. Okay, let's get back to the program.
What do you think? I want to get into some more topical things. We're not going to get to Trump because I kind of feel like it's super toxic at this point. But I would like to ask you about a company called Apple. Mm-hmm. You were never an investor in Apple?
No.
I don't believe so. But you knew Steve Jobs. Mm-hmm. When you look back on the legacy of Steve Jobs, what do you take from it? What was so unique about him as an entrepreneur?
You know, I think what was unique about Steve is what makes great entrepreneurs. They have passion for a vision. Many entrepreneurs start companies to make more money or something like that. When they run into trouble, they give up. They're not pursuing a vision with passion. And when things get rough, if you have passion for a vision, if you have religion, you keep going. If you don't have that religion, you try and do something else. And this is why big companies don't succeed. As soon as the project runs into trouble, if you're an entrepreneur, you bang your head against the wall till you crash through it. And being an entrepreneur sounds glamorous in the press. It's really, really hard. The highs are high, but the lows are really low.
And I think there are more lows than highs.
Yes. I have a presentation on my website that I first did in 1986 with this same title, and most of the slides are the same. This was when PowerPoint first came out. I've updated the slide deck, but it's mostly the same. It's called the entrepreneurial roller coaster, where the highs are high and the lows are low. Yeah. In big companies, when things run into trouble, people try and abandon it, find other jobs to not hurt their careers. When you don't have an option, you make things succeed. And that's why I think entrepreneurs do so much more than big companies do.
So this idea of replacing the founder is something you would look at and say, that's like the last thing you want to do in most cases?
The last thing you want to do is replace the vision of the founder, and that means the founder. You need good management and process, but if it replaces the vision, you will make the same decisions big companies will make, and you will lose the big upside in a company. So it's not always possible, but most of the time you work really, really hard to preserve that.
And you touched on a little bit about the role of a venture assistant, formerly known as venture capitalist. What do you think is the core to being a great venture capitalist? And what are some of the mistakes that you think venture investors, angel investors make when dealing with founders and investing?
Well, I would say there's multiple investing styles. And there are people who run their spreadsheets and do well at it. And there's some pretty good firms with very good returns. It depends on what you want to do. If you're talking about radical risks, really successful firms take radical risks. I say they take the implausible, they make it plausible, and then possible. Is sort of this trajectory people, good entrepreneurs walk, and good investors realize the uncertainty in that and deal with ambiguity reasonably well. I hate it when people want an entrepreneur to follow the business plan or measure against trivial metrics progress instead of the more fundamental causal things that make a company successful or not. So I'm constantly battling boards on that.
Where people want to see the 2016 plan and how we're doing on target versus the vision.
Yeah. So, well, planning is important.
Sure.
But missing plans is not the critical thing. Are you doing the right things and maximizing the probability of success? Sometimes that means meeting plans, and sometimes it means adjusting, doing other things. And you sort of have to ask these questions from first principles, not what was the plan and did you meet it.
And tell me about some of your misses. You were big into the energy sector. You think this is tremendously important. And you were right that energy is probably, in the top three most important verticals we have, along with information, maybe biotech, life extension, all that kind of great stuff. What did you get right and wrong in energy?
In energy, we invested early. And when things got hyped, we actually didn't make a lot of investments at the later stages. So most of our investments were very early. There's a few exceptions where we kept investing later and made some mistakes. But by and large, I feel we'll do okay in energy. Not as great as I'd like. But I'm not disappointed we attempted it. I think we'll build some pretty decent companies in energy and sustainability in general, which is sort of what we call it, sustainability. But when the mood turns, many of these companies suffered from not having other investors to support them. And when that happens, you have to go into triage mode. And we did have to do triage, and it hurts a lot. And some good ideas had to die in triage mode because you take your fund and you allocate the fund. But by and large, I think we did the best we could, and I think our fund in that category of energy investors would probably be pretty good.
Let me ask you, as we wrap up here, given what you've seen over the past...
So just one other thought,
sure.
And this leads to another thing for investors. Diversity is important. And so even our energy funds had a fairly substantial amount of money in other non-energy things. In fact, our principal energy fund had Square in it. So, one great hit like that returns the fund. Right. So the fund does okay.
There is a certain randomness to what we do as investors, yeah? A little bit of luck?
Yep.
I want to ask you just, and as we wrap up here, 3 decades of investing and another decade of building companies and being an immigrant to this country and seeing what you see today, the challenges the world faces, very complex challenges like global warming, very complex challenges around migration, people closing borders, et cetera. Are you optimistic right now, or are you concerned? And looking back on the last 40 years, where in the spectrum of optimism does 2017 stand for you versus pessimism?
I've generally always been an optimist. I think political things come and go. What we are talking about is technology-driven fundamental change that's beneficial for humanity. There is a large problem. I define the problem the following way. 700 million people on the planet probably live a rich lifestyle. It's rich in energy, it's rich in education, it's rich in medical services, it's rich in entertainment. 7 billion people want it. If you say, how do you get 10x the resources to get everybody there, it's not possible, except for technology. Technology is an incredible resource multiplier. It doesn't matter whether you're talking in medicine or energy or entertainment or mobile apps or communications. And I love the fact that it's such a great multiplier that it lets us be optimistic about the future. And at the same time, it gives us a great challenge to go after. So back to your question, why don't I quit? I'd get bored on a beach. What do? You get tired of pina coladas.
Yeah, pretty quick.
Right? There's so many interesting things to work on that can really change the world. I love helping entrepreneurs do that now.
Tell me, are you concerned about AI, robotics, and negative job growth? This has been a very polarizing issue amongst technologists who have the inside information of sort of how much progress we're making on these topics. Where does Vinod Khosla stand on jobs? And are they going to grow? Are they going to contract in some huge, meaningful way?
So I wrote a piece in 2014, long before other people started talking about it, in Forbes, called Great Abundance, Great GDP Growth, Great Productivity Growth, and Increasing Income Disparity. It was more a focus on income disparity, but it talked through all the areas in which technology would replace jobs, and why people who blindly assume that in the past technology has helped create more jobs, that the same would repeat, are fundamentally wrong. So I do think we will have an issue. And we may be seeing the beginnings of it. I don't think it's 10 years away. I think it's 30, 40 years away. But there's very few areas, independent of area of expertise, where I see humans being able to do their jobs, at least 80% of the jobs we have today. So I, in this piece, speculated that more than 50% of the jobs that exist today won't exist in 40 years, and they won't necessarily be replaced. That's a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is people will work because they want to work, not because they need to work. The bad thing is we'll have to address the people who are not working. The good thing, again, is we'll have enough income and income growth and GDP growth to afford that level of luxury. I think the larger problem will be how do you keep people motivated, entertained, happy? Because without a sense of self-worth, people aren't happy. That will be a bigger problem than jobs in the long term.
Because we can redistribute some of the wealth. We could do basic income. We could hire more teachers and nurses.
I'm a big fan, and I've come out on the record supporting some form of universal basic income. Encouraged to see last week that India first started talking about it now. I think it's really important. I love capitalism, but capitalism is by permission of democracy. And democracy only works if everybody benefits. And we've gone the wrong way in that.
Okay. On that note, let's hear it for Vinod Khosla.
Thank you.
Our iTunes review of the week is from 2020. As a 20-year vet in the business, I am still learning something new every time I listen. Great show with great guests.